Hi guys, it's Jess, and I'm back with another Rev-related video. This time, we're going to be talking about Rev Captioning versus Rev Transcribing to see which one is better. As always, feel free to skip over some sections that are not relevant to you by clicking on the timestamps that I've left down below and also in the pinned comment. Also, before we go any further, be sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe to my channel. Okay, let's get into it. So first of all, a brief introduction to what Rev.com transcription is. I actually made an entire video where I go into detail about this topic, so feel free to check that out. But basically, long story short, Rev.com is a transcriptioning and captioning service where you can work as a freelancer typing out audio files and video files. And you get paid a pretty penny, quite literally penny, because the pay isn't that great, but we'll get to that. So what is captioning then, and how does it differ from transcribing? So the main difference is the media that you're working with. So with transcribing, you're mostly working with audio files, so there's no visual component and you're just typing out everything that you hear. Whereas with captioning, it usually involves a video, so there's visuals involved. So for example, closed captions are the things that you see when you're watching a Netflix video or watching a YouTube video. You know, they're the words that you see at the bottom of the screen. So in a Rev Captioning project, you use Rev's free closed captioning tool to type out everything that you hear in the video. So this can actually include atmospheric sounds like sound effects, music, lyrics, basically everything. And then the final step is you need to sync these captions to the video by dragging them like so. And by the way, you need to apply for both transcription and captioning services separately. So just because you have an account as a Rev transcriber does not automatically mean that you also have an account as a Rev captioner. They both have their own separate applications, and I'll actually go through the captioning application with you later in the video. Now, the main captioning service on Rev is in English, and that's the one that I'll be talking about today. But there's also a third section that you can apply for, and that one's the foreign subtitles, which if you know other languages, you can translate English to another language. And this one seems to pay much more than the other two, which makes sense because there is that added skill set of knowing a second language. Which leads me to a question that you're probably the most curious about right off the bat, and that is, which one pays more? So when comparing captioning and transcribing, technically, captioning does pay a little bit more, as projects start at about 54 cents per minute for captioning and about 45 cents per minute for transcribing. With that said, each individual project has its own price. So you may get a transcription project that pays way more than the starting pay that I just mentioned. So I wouldn't say that one drastically pays more than the other. It really is dependent on the specific projects that you choose to work on. So that's kind of a brief rundown of how it works, and we'll get to the pros and cons a little bit later in the video. But first, I quickly want to show you guys the application process for Rev Captioning. So as I mentioned before, you have to apply to become a Rev Captioner and a Rev Transcriber separately. So I, for example, was already a Rev Transcriber, and I had to fill out a new application for Rev Captioning. And it does not automatically mean that you'll get accepted to one just because you got accepted to the other. However, luckily the application process for Rev Captioning was almost identical to the application for Rev Transcribing. The only difference is the last part where you have to do a sample Rev Captioning project versus a sample transcribing project, which makes sense. So the first section is pretty self-explanatory. You just fill out some basic personal information, and then in the next section, which I won't show you because that's technically cheating, but you basically answer some pretty simple grammar-related, like sentence structure questions, just so they can make sure that you're competent enough in the English language. You also go through the style guide where you learn about all the details regarding how to properly make captions using their captioning tool. And then in the end, you complete a sample captioning project using their software. And this is where you really want to put the style guide to good use and, you know, take your time with it. They do give you a few hours to complete it, and it's not too long, but you want to make sure that you remember all of the details, because I will say I did find the sample video a little bit tricky. Like, you can tell that they included all the various like little components that they want to see in a perfect captioning project. So you have access to the style guide while you're working on it, so you don't have to memorize anything. Then all you need to do is submit it and wait for an email. Now, they do point out on their website that they currently have a wait list to get accepted, so it may be a while for you to hear back from them. I guess there's just so many people out there applying for Rev at the same time. Okay, now it's time to spill the tea and discuss what the pros and the cons to Rev Captioning are. Let's start out with the pros. So pro number one is that it technically pays more than transcribing, as I mentioned previously. Not by a lot though, and it's really dependent on the specific projects that you do. But the starting pay for a captioning project is 54 cents a minute, and the starting pay for a transcribing project is 45 cents a minute. The second pro is there's actually way more transcriptionists than there are captioners. So this may come as an advantage because you're basically competing with less people to caption the same projects, but it's highly recommended that you apply for both. That way, if one of the services is kind of running low on good projects, you can always just switch over to the other one. Okay, so this next pro is more of a personal preference, but in my opinion, I think working with videos is slightly more fun than working with audio files. I'm a very visual person, so I think working with videos and being able to actually see the people talking as I write down what they're saying is a little bit more interesting. And the videos tend to be of a more commercial nature, so you might be able to caption some movies, some documentaries, some live concerts, even some like animations. While with transcribing, you can definitely get some interesting transcription projects, but there are a lot of boring ones out there. Like all of those law ones and the lectures, like those ones really bore me. Another pro is that captioning projects tend to have crisper audio as opposed to transcription projects where, a lot of them do have the most atrocious audio. Like it just sounds like it was recorded using a potato. And I think that has to do with the fact that most of the video files submitted tend to be commercial. So with commercial type videos, the audio has to be as clear as possible. And having crisp audio definitely makes the project much easier to work with. And the last pro, which is pretty much a pro to working at Rev in general, and that is you get to work from home and you get to set your own hours. So there's no limitations there, which can come in handy. Okay, now on to the cons. So first of all, I think there is, to an extent, more of a learning curve when it comes to captioning. Captioning projects can be a bit more challenging than transcription projects, and that's mostly due to the fact that they just have more components to them. Also, while in transcription jobs there are many verbatim projects where you have to like type out literally everything you hear, there's also a lot of non-verbatim projects, whereas with captioning, essentially every project is verbatim. So you're not only capturing speech, you're also capturing music, lyrics, and general atmospherics that you hear. On top of that, there's many unique rules that come with captioning. For example, if there's already like text at the bottom of the video, you need to make sure that the captions that you produce bumper above that text. So there's all these little things that you have to be aware of. And then of course there's the added component. When you're done captioning a project, you then have to sync all of the captions to the correct parts of the video, so like dragging them around using their tool. It actually reminds me a lot of like video editing in a way, so there's definitely like just more components to it in general. With that said, there is a style guide for a reason, and I'm sure, although there is like a big learning curve in the beginning, if you keep referring to the style guide, I'm sure you can get all the answers that you need. So yeah, there's definitely much more moving parts when it comes to captioning that almost makes the extra cents that you earn from it not as worth it. Now, the other cons that actually have to do more so with working for Rev in general are that you don't get paid for the amount that you actually worked on the project. So it could take you like several hours to complete a project. You only get paid for, however long that project is. So if it's a 1-minute project, you'll get however many cents for that. And that is a major complaint that people have, because you're putting all this work into it and it doesn't really matter if you get it done within minutes or hours, you still get paid the same. I've also seen a lot of complaints in the comments of my videos regarding the grading process. The grading of your projects can be very inconsistent depending on who's grading them. Like, you can have someone who's incredibly harsh or someone who's more laid back, and that's obviously not very fair. And it makes the job very unstable, because if you do end up getting graded poorly, then you risk losing your account permanently. Well, that was a lot of information for one video. I hope it helped, and if it did, then be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I have a whole lot of other fun content over here on the internet. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Good luck with your application process, and see you guys next time. Bye.